So let's get your reaction then to that new law on minimum levels of service during strikes. Why don't you want to see it come into place?
Well, good morning, Ali, Stephen. Very simply, because I think that the right to withdraw one's labour is actually a hallmark of a civilised society, and a society which respects the basic rights of its citizens. And, you know, the truth is that we already in this country have some of the most restrictive trade union laws in Europe. And what this bill would mean, effectively, is that where an individual votes for strike action and where a union collectively votes to take strike action in a democratic ballot, a majority of members have voted for that action, then the government can effectively still force some of those workers to cross picket lines. Now, anybody who's been involved in the trade union movement, as I have for many years, knows what a cardinal sin it's seen in the movement to cross a picket line, and to basically force workers to cross picket lines which are being manned by their colleagues. A, I think it is completely unprincipled and unethical, and B, I just don't think it would work. The idea that workers are going to be strong-armed into breaking a strike that they've voted for, I think is just fanciful. So in the end, I think this bill, it certainly is a backward bill, and it's going to inflame the situation and, in my view, make the strife even worse.
I totally get what you're saying, Paul. It's a bit of a curveball, though, but what about those people? Couldn't it be used in a positive way? But there must always be people who end up going on strike but don't want to, for whatever reason. Maybe they don't agree with it, maybe they just want to keep making the money, which is fair enough. But as you say, crossing the picket line is such a cardinal sin that obviously they wouldn't be able to do it. Well, doesn't it give those people an opportunity to actually keep working if they choose to, and at least they've got an excuse to do it?
Well, I mean, the truth is, Stephen, if people were not in the union in the first place, then they wouldn't have taken part in that ballot. They wouldn't have at the moment, the legal protections in terms of taking industrial action. So many of those people, I imagine, would decide to work anyway. What we're talking about here is people who are members of the union and people who have taken part in a democratic ballot and may well, in line with other members in the union, have voted for strike action, and being forced to cross picket lines. Now, as I said, A, it's a completely unethical thing to do, but B, it strikes me as a bit like the government is acting the role in a boxing match where somebody's kind of getting hit and then decides to change the rules halfway through and say, actually, I want my opponent to fight with one hand tied behind his back because he's being a bit too effective and he's landing a few too many blows. I think that's what's happening at the moment because the government has been stung by the effectiveness of many of the strikes. Then instead of saying, well, hold on a second, what do we need to do to resolve these strikes? They seem to be taking a much more militant approach, saying, well, how can we change the rules halfway through? How can we stop these people from fighting back in the way that they're doing? And as I say, what it's going to do ultimately is just make the situation worse and probably lead to more strikes. And I don't think the government has properly considered that.
I mean, the government would say that they recognise the want of workers and unions to negotiate over fair pay, but they would also say that they need to protect the public when it comes to relying on services such as the fire brigade. They want the public to be confident that during strike action they can call for an ambulance or the fire brigade and they would be there. Essentially, they want to keep the public safe.
I don't think you resolve these things by interfering with people's basic rights. And as I said, the right to withdraw one's labour is one of those basic rights. And I don't doubt that there's huge disruption and inconvenience going on at the moment, but you don't turn yourself effectively into an authoritarian state in order to resolve that. You look at the bigger picture and think, well, hold on a second, why is it that so many workers, many of whom have never taken strike action before, are suddenly taking to picket lines? It's because of the economic landscape that they're in, the fact that we've got the tightest wage squeeze in this country since Napoleonic times, the fact that people are seeing constantly their real wages falling, the fact that people are struggling to make ends meet and pay their mortgages and energy bills. And the government needs to say, well, how do we address that? We don't take the big stick approach. We need to resolve this by giving people decent pay. And it seems to me that the government hasn't tried that hard enough. In some sectors, it's working, where the government has shown a bit of flexibility. And I would urge them to actually take that same approach right throughout the sector, rather than trying to force people to cross picket lines.
OK, Paul, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.